Okay, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Carly. So Carly, again, if I missed anything, go ahead and fill in. Otherwise, you have the floor.
Great. Thank you, Erin. No, I think you covered everything, and we'll just go ahead and jump right in here. So what I'm going to discuss today are some common mistakes in utility outreach, and hopefully be able to provide some tips and basically some areas to remember. So next time you go forward, whether you do the projects yourself or outsource those outreach projects, that you'll have kind of some guidance on what you want to focus in on to make sure it can be the most effective outreach piece. All right, so first on, I know that there's several people here on the call, and I just want to do a quick overview of Goldstreet, because some of you may, I think, are very new to us and may not have worked with us before, or so I think that may just help a little bit in terms of our experience and why, we can discuss the common mistakes we have seen. So first off, okay, sorry, there's a little delay here in what's coming up on the screen. Goldstreet's been around for 12 years, and all we do is utility outreach, specifically with utilities, government agencies, and municipalities. And Erin, it's not working. The delay is really strong there. Erin, are you there? There you go. Erin, if you can go ahead and just move forward on the slides through my discussion, that would be great. So now it's jumping way ahead because it's catching up. All right, so perfect. Sorry about that. Okay, so all we do is work with utilities. In fact, we have worked with over 360 utilities and municipalities across the United States, I believe in over 30 states, including video, web, print, creative strategy, consulting, behavior change, and social media as well. And in that, we've completed over 3,000 projects. So that's just a little background of why, when I say the common mistakes we've seen, that we have seen a lot of projects, worked with a lot of utilities, and so that's kind of the background of where this presentation comes from. All right, the first mistake, and the most common mistake we see, is only communicating when required. Due to city ordinance, state and federal requirements, water and electricity providers are often required to communicate, and therefore, oftentimes because of budget constraints, time constraints, a belief in management or even in the communications department that there may not be a need to communicate with customers, and often this is based from a non-competitive environment when, as you know, your customers move into town or need any water or electricity service. They don't really have a choice in who they use the majority of the time, and therefore there's a non-competitive environment, and that breeds or generates an attitude sometimes that communication isn't important. And so those are kind of the reasons of why we hear that utilities communicate only when required. And you've probably heard this before, but consumers today are more educated and savvy than ever. Technology has put communication at everyone's fingertips all day long. But with that, customers have also generated an expectation that they want to hear from companies, brands, and the services that they use often. And with that, it helps generate trust. So this expectation is a big shift in the marketplace as customers align themselves and appreciate those companies and services that are trying to build the relationship and trust with them. So the great thing with utilities is that the utilities are in a perfect position to build trust because utilities provide an incredibly valuable service to customers that your customers rely on every day. Turning on the lights, having clean, fresh water to use. Those are two key components that put you in a position because of what you provide that you can build trust with your customers. So instead of only potentially providing, I don't know if it's negative information, but whether it be a rate increase, outage information, utilities are in a position to become a resource through programs, educating on what programs are available, tips, time-saving services, and because customers are busier than ever, they seek out these options to save money and time, and utilities are in a good position to share that information. All right, I'm trying to get the slide going here. All right, so with messages bombarding customers every day, having steady and reliable information builds trust over time. And by showing them that you're there and that you're more than just a service that only communicates when you're raising rates or if there's a crisis, if customers have a better understanding of what you do day in and day out, can relate to employees and what your teams are working on daily, they often take that news when there is an issue or a rate increase because they have built that customer trust and they know you're doing good work and you are a resource to them. So the solution to avoid this, number one, the first mistake is to become a trusted resource and to communicate consistently. All right, mistake number two is stuffing every topic possible into every inch of space. So often, due to mistake number one, only communicating when required, it automatically generates that when that communication does take place, that oftentimes that outreach material has way too many messages in it. And we actually, I think a great example, we literally just worked with a client on a TV spot, and it was a 30-second TV spot. And although they thought it was focused by focusing on clogs for the holiday season, they wanted to do both toilet clogs and kitchen clogs and focus on cooking, which when you've got 30 seconds and trying to stuff everything with clogs into one 30-second spot can affect your efficiency and actually not only how many people watch or read your information, but how effective it is as a whole. So if you think of talking to a friend or family member, if you are trying to, I don't know, convince them of something or have a conversation, you may not give them 10 things to consider. You may focus on your strongest points. And this is the same thing when communicating with your customers. Instead of trying to give 20 tips, maybe we should give 3 tips or 5 tips. If you can get your readers or viewers to walk away with one change or one tip, then you've succeeded. So having a focus and objective will allow that to happen, and understanding what your objective is prior to creating your outreach is critical to this success. So for example, if your goal is to prevent sink clogs due to grease going down the drain, then focus on sink clogs only and don't try to stuff more information in there on other types of clogs, even though it may relate to sewer. So having a clear objective will help. So the lesson or the solution to avoid this mistake then would be to communicate simply. And with that comes prioritizing. So prioritize your tips, pick your top 3 and focus on those alone, and come up with another way to communicate the other information rather than stuffing it all into one piece. So solution number 2, prioritize and communicate simply. All right, mistake 3, using letterhead. Believe it or not, we still see a lot of communication from a utility going out on letterhead. And there is a time and a place for letterhead, but oftentimes it's used because it's perceived as the simple solution. It allows someone to check the project off their plate, say that they've communicated on a topic by putting it on letterhead and getting it in the mail. The reality is, as you know as a consumer, is that there's a lot of noise in the marketplace, whether it be in your mailbox, on your phone, on the television. So breaking through the noise is a critical component to getting success and readership. In order to do that, the outreach and messaging needs to be attractive and enticing, and you need to maximize and utilize your investment. If you're already doing a mailing, which is typically how a letterhead would be distributed, then make sure, if you're spending the money on postage already, to have the most effective piece of outreach with that messaging, where letterhead may not be the best investment. Even notices, for example, if you need to notify a customer if they're in a violation or something, an attractive notice, whether it be a door hanger or a billboard type message that really attracts their attention, would be more effective than letterhead. So the solution to this is to communicate creatively. All right, mistake number 4, poor graphics. We see this often, a piece that comes to us, whether it's just to reprint or potentially to upgrade a bit, where it includes clip art, or maybe it's low-res photos. So easy tips to avoid poor graphics. Say no to clip art. Say no to low-resolution photos. Your teams around you are top-notch employees that have special certifications, have, the operating sophisticated plant systems, and therefore the creative that you put out should match the professionalism of the employees that are working around you. Along those lines, today, more than ever, customers have very short attention spans. So we want to make sure that if we get their attention, or when we have their attention, that we actually can get our messages across. So providing photos that may be blurry or very small, clip art that really doesn't relate, those things automatically. Did everyone lose that presentation? It just went off my screen. So I'll keep talking, Erin, but I'm not seeing the presentation anymore.
Yeah, I know I can still see it. If
Okay, so hopefully people are chatting. That's fine because I can still talk from my end.
I can see it.
Okay,
okay,
if you can't
perfect.
see it, go ahead and put
That's
something
all.
in the chat.
Yeah, thank you. All right, so every piece of communication is distributed, whether by website, paper bills, brochures, community events, and trade shows, all represent your organization. And utilities are so sophisticated and so professional in order to provide service to thousands of customers day in and day out. But it's also important that that communication matches the quality. So it's no wonder that without any communication or low quality communication, your customers may get cranky if there's an outage, a rate increase, or some other message that they're not familiar with. If they do get high quality communications, then customers often relate what they see, right? High quality communications match high quality service. So the solution to avoid the solution here is to communicate professionally. Have your outreach match the professional team that's behind you every day, providing the strong service that you do every day to your customers. Mistake number 5, engineering speak. Or maybe it's not engineering, but industry speak, either one. It happens in every industry, not just utilities, but a specific language, acronyms are used. People working in the industry speak the language every single day. It's second nature to them, and it makes it very easy then when moving to outreach that they transfer that language directly into the outreach. But the bottom line is this language that's second nature to you is not second nature to your customers. They typically only worry about their utilities or city services when there's an issue, right? The lights don't go on, or there's something with their water, or potentially their bill. So being able to communicate in a language that they understand is another mistake that we see. And it's very hard to do when you're living and breathing it every day, and oftentimes it's even a passion within the utility. And we just had another client on the phone, and all they do is conservation, household conservation. And trying to narrow down a focus to make tips simple for customers is very challenging for them because they're so passionate about it that kind of dumbing it down and coming up with simple tips is challenging. So we use the phrase dumbing it down because there's a reason general public is called the general public. When you're communicating to all of your customers as a whole, it needs to be very simple with very clear tips or information that anyone can understand. If there is which typically becomes a very small percentage of your market that wants additional, more detailed information, they're going to find it, whether it's water quality report data or other studies. They can call in or typically find information on our website. So in order to eliminate the engineering speak, we encourage to not use acronyms and just have very simple, maybe not even use technical phrases at all that you would typically use. So with all of this in mind, to solve tip number 5, we encourage you to communicate appropriately. Consider your audience and communicate appropriately. So we know that budgets are tight, timing's tight, and opportunities to connect with customers may be less often than you'd like. But when you do have the opportunity to get in front of customers and grab their attention, these tips will help you do so. And we encourage you to take these tips along with you, remember them, or even this presentation as you do your next outreach project so that you can have the most effective outreach that you possibly can moving forward. So just a quick recap, or the 5 takeaways today are to communicate consistently, communicate simply, communicate creatively, communicate professionally, and communicate appropriately. So if you do have any questions, we're happy to answer them at this time. And we'll go ahead and stop the recording. But before doing so, we do want to remind you to go ahead and mark your calendars. You can get it on our website. The next Ask Us Hour is scheduled for January 24th, 2018, so next year at 8:30 a.m. Pacific. And the topic of that presentation will be creating engaging social media posts. So, all right, with that, Erin, if you want to go ahead and maybe you did already stop the recording, and then we'll move to the Q&A.